This episode is brought to you by my Grad School Femtoring merch. We have the perfect holiday gift idea for all the amazing femtors in your life. It's the season of giving for many, and what better way to thank that professor, advisor, supervisor, or sponsor who's been guiding your professional journey than with our Femtor merch line, which is designed to honor and celebrate those who uplift others through a feminist and intersectional lens. From our premium eco hoodies to our garment dyed tees, each piece celebrates the spirit of femtorship. Want something cozy? Our Femtor mugs, paired with our handcrafted soy wax candles, make the perfect self-care gift set. And to send a thoughtful thank you, check out our minimalist greeting cards and holographic stickers. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and so I'm really excited for you. Whether you're shopping for your favorite femtor or treating yourself, these pieces carry meaning beyond just merch. This is a way for you to acknowledge yourself and those around you who have made an impact. Go to gradschoolfemtoring.com/shop to place your order before the holiday season ends. Welcome to the award-winning Grad School Femtoring Podcast, the place for first-gen BIPOCs to listen in on inclusive grad school stories and learn about personal development and productivity tips. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, a certified coach, consultant, and author, and I will be serving as your femtor, providing you with insider knowledge to help you reach your personal and professional goals. Welcome back, everyone, to the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is your host, Doctora Yvette. Today, we're going to cover the topic of how to thrive in academia and how to build a consulting business. I'm really excited about this episode. Today, our guest is Dr. Ramon Goings. He is an associate professor in the Language, Literacy, and Culture Interdisciplinary Doctoral Program at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and founder of Done Dissertation, a dissertation consulting organization that helps doctoral students, doctoral programs, and graduate student organizations break down the dissertation process into manageable pieces so that doctoral students can finish their dissertations in record time. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Ramon.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Happy to have you here. I would love to hear more about you, about your backstory, who you are, what you do, and how did you get into all of this? I know you're a scholar, but you're also an entrepreneur, so love to hear more about all of that.
All this stuff sometimes happens just by chance. It was never, you had told me 10, 15 years ago that I'd be doing anything around business. And then also even get a doctorate. That was not necessarily on my radar. So the fact that I'm here has definitely been a journey. But, as a background, I actually started out as a teacher. So I initially went to school when I was a kid. My passion was music. And so I loved music. I would listen to music. I learned how to play every instrument. It was something I was very passionate about. And I said, you know what? I want to become part of the music industry. I want to be a music producer. And when I went to undergraduate school at Lynchburg College, part of what my backup plan was like, I'll just do music education just in case the music industry thing doesn't work out. And lo and behold, my sophomore year, I walk into a second grade classroom and I fall in love with kids and working with them. And so it kind of pushed my whole decision around the music industry to say, you know what, I'm actually going to be an educator and teach. And so I spent a number of years as a music education teacher and special education teacher. And so I have a passion for teaching folks. And so I found that just from those beginnings of, teaching people, sometimes when you're good at what you can teach, people are like, teach me more of that and teach me more. Yeah. So, it got to a point where when I was in my classroom, I was like, there's got to be something more than just being in the classroom. And someone was like, you realize that maybe you might become the principal. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. I might become the principal. And then I decided, principals need to have a doctorate. I don't know where I got this idea from, but I just thought that was the path that you went. I realized that the doctor had nothing to do with being a principal. I didn't need this degree, but it made me fall in love when I got into my doctoral program with research and, trying to figure this thing out. I was always intrigued by understanding something and figuring something out that I didn't know before. And so going into the doctoral program, I just started to really immerse myself in the work. And at that point, after I finished, all my professors started to send me their students like, oh, Ramon has figured this thing out. Go see him. And so by going seeing me for these couple years after I finished, it birthed into a company. I've done dissertation. So it's like a matter of I never intended to do any of these things. It just so happened that, I love teaching. I mean, to a doc program. For a doc program, I got good at what I was doing. So I started helping people, again, teaching. And then from there, it just grew into, 6, 7 years later, to a full-fledged company that's helped hundreds of students, get through the process.
I love to hear that. It's interesting because I feel like we have some parallels
Okay.
in that I started out in theater and I started out thinking that that was where I was going to go in
Yeah.
theater practice performance. And also, I'm currently a homeschool educator
Okay.
and a mother to an autistic child. And so the world of special needs is a world that I've been exposed to actually from the public school setting as
Sure.
well. And so I have a lot of respect and admiration for educators because it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of skill
Yes.
to be, especially classroom management.
Yes.
I have a lot of friends that are also educators in the public school system. So I understand to some extent, have an idea of what it's like.
Yeah.
And also in graduate school, I was that person people would come to me. Can you edit my paper?
Yes.
That became my little editing side hustle.
Yep.
And
That's my head
somehow,
too.
eventually, it became coaching and consulting. So I appreciate you sharing more about your story. I love that you have this music background,
Yeah.
this special education background, and that now you have found a way to bring all of these things into your academic work and your consulting work, which is also academic in a different way.
For sure. And it's funny, this is what I'll add. It's just funny real quick for folks like how sometimes your past where it's like it feels disconnected, but it all comes together. So just for example, when I was teaching music, I ended up getting a job. I needed to move. So I moved from Connecticut, where I was from, to Maryland. And the first job I got, the person who's hired me at the school said, all right, Mr. Goings, I can hire you. Part of your job is going to be music education and teaching music, but also part of your job is going to be being the video production teacher. At that point, I knew nothing about video. I knew nothing about editing, any of that stuff. You asked me about Final Cut Pro, any of these things, I knew nothing about it at the time. So I literally had to teach myself all of these things so that I could teach my students. But lo and behold, 20 years later, I use all those same skills now as a content creator on, doing content. I haven't been able to edit my own if I needed to edit my own work and understand how all the audio, how everything works. It's all that stuff that happened in my background. And so it's just interesting how it all comes back together.
It really does. Yeah. So you told us a little bit more about what inspired you to pursue a doctorate, but I'm curious. I know you also shared a little bit more how folks are reaching out to you. At what point did you transition into formally starting a consulting organization? At what point did you make that pivot?
Yeah, I started to make the pivot because just like you, how you mentioned that you were doing editing. And so a lot of times when I was a student, and the interesting part is I actually struggled when I first started my doc program. I was a struggling student. So it was a challenge for me to write. I had troubles with writing. And so one of my professors, even on a page of my paper, put a big X on it and said, Ramon, you're going to need a writing coach or editor in order to improve this document. And so I took on that challenge. So for the next year and a half or so, I really immersed myself and studied the craft of academic writing. And so that allowed me to improve. And then again, I was editing people's papers. And then as I was finishing up my program, I started to publish. I was out publishing the faculty, but then all the students are coming, hey, can you edit my paper? Can you edit my paper? And these are my friends. So I was doing it for free, but it got to a point where I got a lot of work going on. I got to start charging for this stuff. And initially it was like I was doing people's editing work and I was just editing and editing dissertations, all that type of stuff when I finished. And what I noticed is that a lot of times people needed editing support, which is what they thought. And then I had to actually sit down with them and go through my edits and why I did certain things, or I know people missed some pieces like, oh, your theoretical framework is not aligned to your research problem or your research question. So it's a misalignment. That's an issue beyond editing. And so I found myself doing more coaching. And then at some point, my wife leaves me like, Ramon, just start charging people to coach. Like, it seems like you're doing that already. You put an infrastructure around it. And so that then put me on a journey to go in more into business development and figure out how do I even start this thing? How do I package what essentially my intellectual property to be able to sell? And so I just went on a journey for a couple of years, doing different business courses. So I understood that landscape and it just grew into dissertation.
now that you have built this business and it sounds like it's pretty solid at this stage, I'm curious, what are some of the lessons that you've learned in the years that you've been doing this about the dissertation process in particular? A lot of my listeners are graduate students.
Yeah.
Some of them are undergrads, but a good number of them are grad students. And they're first gen, they're BIPOC. A lot of them could probably benefit from dissertation coaching. Again, it's just an assumption because I know it can help everyone.
Sure.
But yeah, what are some of the lessons that you've learned about managing the dissertation process and finally getting to finish, completing in whatever their version is of in a timely manner?
The interesting thing, and I learned this from my own process, and so just so people have the backstory, I wrote my dissertation in 7 months, start to finish. Like I finished and understood and got through it pretty quickly. But there were some things I learned along the way, which helped me form how I think through the coaching process. One is that I recognized that writing a dissertation is actually 80% thinking and getting clear in your head, and 20% the mechanic of doing, sitting at the computer typing. I think for a lot of students, what I see from coaching hundreds of students is that sometimes they approach the process as a task they need to do, and they look at the mechanic of writing. And so they don't
Right.
always take a step back to say, well, if my head is not clear, then of course what's going to come out is not clear. And so for a lot of people, in terms of doc students, you're probably managing, families, work responsibilities, and trying to figure out how to balance and juggle it all, but not recognizing that something's going to have to be sacrificed a little in order to finish. And so I find when people are willing to make that sacrifice, especially around things that take up a lot of time and energy, able to reclaim that time and then push it back into their writing, into their thought process. So that was like a thing I had for me. So I was a public school teacher up until I got towards my dissertation process. And I recognized quickly that if I wanted to get out, I was going to have to move out of teaching. It was just too much to do, like just the day to day of being a classroom teacher. So I transitioned to a staff position in higher ed. And I literally took a 20, $25,000 pay cut to go to higher ed, only because I knew that if I could reclaim my time and finish, it was almost like a slingshot. I would recoup that plus more when I finished. And so that was a sacrifice, again, I even had to make as part of my journey. It was the reason why I finished. And so that's a key component. And then part of it is, and I just had a workshop with a university yesterday. We were talking about writing practices. And a lot of times as a doc student, you don't recognize who your audience is that you're writing to. So sometimes you can make mistakes because you might be thinking your audience is scholars in your field, or the audience is, someone else, but your audience are those 3 to 6 committee members that are reviewing your work. And so with that, you have to be able and willing to study the craft of what those people do. So like, look at your chair and your committee members' dissertations. Look at their research. They're like giving you the answers to the test. Just look at how they write, how
Right.
they think through writing, because they're going to approach probably that in terms of how they review your writing. So it's like some of
Mhm.
those things were like a lot of the shifts that I think a lot of doc students make. Then the last one, and I'll leave with this one, is that if doc students start struggling with the writing component, sometimes it's also a result of the reading aspect. I find that a lot of
Yeah.
students, may not have either read enough, or, where it comes to when you sit down to write. And if I look at a 1-page, part of your document, and I see the same author cited 4 times, the same paper, it's like a red flag to a chair or a faculty member, like, oh, this person doesn't really know either the literature in this area or how to integrate the literature appropriately. And so some of those things are really at the foundation of what trips up a lot of students.
Right. And I know you started to share the things that can impact. Actually, I really like that 80-20 rule, by the way, about like 80% is just dealing with the mind
Yeah, it's
stuff.
really,
And even thinking about like giving yourself credit, that also takes time and energy, because a lot of times I find myself like working with graduate students where they're not giving themselves credit. They're only giving themselves credit for words on a page, and they
yeah.
spend all this time and energy working on other aspects that's still part of the dissertation process. So I appreciate that. But I'm curious, actually, in addition to naming the lessons that you've learned in supporting so many graduate students, what are specific strategies that could be helpful to help students and scholars thrive? So thriving in grad school, thriving in academia. I know you mentioned in graduate school, you do have to make some sacrifices, which I understand to be true if you want to finish on
Yeah.
time, especially, or if you have a tight deadline, something's got to give.
Yeah.
And that can impact your ability to thrive, but it's a temporary sacrifice. But I'm curious, again, just like broadly speaking, what are some strategies you would recommend that, may help others to figure out how they can thrive?
Yeah, I think first is you have to have your definition of what thriving looks like for you. I think a lot of times in higher ed, and I have a lot of conversations with our clients about this, we see what like our, say, top scholar in our field is doing, and we see that as what success looks like. And then because you're trying to achieve that goal of success, you don't know what that person's goal is for themselves. So they may have a very different end result than what you want for you. And so I think it's important as, folks in grad school or even early career folks, it's like figure out what is it that you want out of this. For instance, for me being in this space where I'm a faculty member and I thrive in the faculty position. So like if you looked at my CV, I write a lot, write more than a lot of faculty. But
Mhm.
I also knew I wanted to build and have a business that helped people. And so that's a very unique pathway that not a lot of folks in my space might take. And so I had to be comfortable with knowing where I wanted to go and what vision I had for myself so that if I heard the noise, I could just kind of tune it out. So I think that's a critical component if you're trying to thrive. And then also part of it is getting help in places that you might find that you're, struggling in. So for instance, when I was a student, I knew, and even when I first started my faculty position, I knew nothing about going after grants. I was trying to
Mhm.
figure it out. And then I had a mentor, shout out to Dr. Chance Lewis at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. He was like, "Hey, Ramon, you do a lot of writing over there. I see that CV looks great. However, you're trying to go to the next level where for me, I wanted to be in a endowed chair." He was like, "You got to be able to go after the funds as well."
Mhm.
So I kind of went on a journey to learn. And so I just sought out help from folks who have secured grants. And then I started going after them. I got very successful at that. So I got millions of dollars in grants. So like just from being willing to like start and recognizing I needed help from people who have been where I'm trying to go. So I think that's another
Yeah.
component. And then also just being mindful that um, you don't have to speed through this thing. Sometimes it's like I hear folks like, "Grant, so I got to write all these papers. I got to do all these things." Like, don't do so much as you burn yourself out. And so I think part of it, and there's a bad culture in higher ed about just like trying to take on all of these things and not doing them well because you just burnt out and tired. So I think for a lot of folks, it's just reevaluating what's important, do those couple of things, do them really well, and then you got to leave the rest alone.
I wanna ask you to expand on one of
Yeah,
the things that you touched on
yeah,
today because it's something that comes up a lot for the folks that I personally work with
yeah,
that are predominantly women of color. So you mentioned that you sought out help. You sought out help from folks, especially in the areas you needed more support in, particularly grant writing, and since then, you have been very successful at getting millions of dollars worth of grants, which is great. That's incredible. But I'm thinking to myself about a listener that is currently struggling to ask for help and struggling to find mentors, especially mentors that look like them or sound like them, or that could serve as role models, even if they don't have the exact same identity markers. So I wonder if you could expand a little bit more on that process of seeking out help and yeah, what does that look like to seek out help? Especially if you're talking to someone, let's say you're just talk to me as an
yeah.
example. When I was a graduate student, I struggled with asking for help because I felt like I bothered people. I
Hmm.
now
I love that.
understand
Yep.
that I don't necessarily bother people and that I have my own worth and that it's a reciprocal relationship and that I have a lot to offer. I understand that now, but I know that not everybody is there when they are a graduate student, is feeling that way, that I am enough and that I have a lot to offer and that I deserve to get help. But anyway, I want to hear from you to just expand a little bit more about
Yeah,
this.
I got a couple ideas. Sorry, I'm jotting them down as you were talking, some things that just came up and some strategies and things I've implemented. So a couple of pieces. I think when we think about mentors, sometimes I find that it's not for everyone, but I see sometimes folks look at mentors as like the one-stop shop for everything. And so I think you have to think about it more like a team effort. Like, who is your mentor team? And so you may have someone that fits the slot, like, oh, I want to help, I want to work with someone or need help from someone who knows a lot on like publications and journals or writing.
Mhm.
So I have a person that helps me with that. I may have another person who helps me. Like, I want to build my consulting practice. I may have someone who's done that as a faculty or wherever I'm trying to go. I have a person for that. So it's like being mindful of what you need and then identifying a person for that particular task. You're always going to have people that are going to help broadly on everything, right? I have those people as well. But sometimes you just need like kind of like you're just folks who have a particular skill set. So I think that's important because then it becomes not just the question, can you be my mentor? It's like, no, your question becomes more specific. Oh, I'm looking to apply for more grants from the National Science Foundation. Can you walk me through one of your proposals and how you went about doing that? Now you're asking very specific questions.
Yes.
And then tied to that, once you do that part, because sometimes, especially when you don't know the person, it's hard to make that particular ask. However, what you could do, where I think that this same scenario makes it a little bit easier, is let's say the grant was a grant opportunity. You would say, actually, I've identified this particular grant where I can have a mentor and advisor on this grant once I write it up. I would love to write you into this grant if you can just show me the process of the writing process and how you approach it. So now it becomes not you taking from someone else. It's like it's reciprocal. Now you provide an
I love that.
opportunity for someone else and they're providing opportunity to you. I think more people, especially senior folks, are more open to those type of things versus you just saying, be my mentor. I need everything in your head in my head type of thing. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
aspect. And then I take this from the music industry because again, our past comes back. So I
Mm-hmm.
did spend some time going into the industry as a producer. And part of the thing I had to learn in that space was you got to shoot your shot. You got to let the person hear your music, let them hear those tracks and see if they're going to buy it or see if they're going to write to it or not. And so you got to take the same approach when finding mentors. Just know that people may not reach out. And I used to get upset about it and have my little list of people that was like, no, I'm not helping them if it happens. But now I'm on the other side. I get it sometimes just more at
Mm-hmm.
capacity. So you have to recognize everyone's a person. They have lives. You may not fit always into what's happening at that point in time. So don't take it personal necessarily. This is why I ask a lot of different folks. That way you have a wide variety of people that you can reach out to. But you got to shoot your shot because if you don't ask,
Right.
your answer will always be no. And so that's always in my mind about anything. Applying for fellowships, applying for anything. I'm like, I might as well apply because if I don't, I surely won't get the opportunity then.
Yeah, I love that. You got to shoot your shot. And it
Yeah.
reminds me also of how you got to take initiative too,
Yeah.
and you got to follow up. And that's one thing that I
Oh,
was
that's the key. The
just
follow up
having.
is so important. That's where you win. That's where you
Yes.
win.
Yes. And I only mentioned that because I was talking to a grad student earlier today and the topic of mentorship came up too. And I was telling her that for me over time, as I've continued on in my career, I found myself to have more mentees and
Mm-hmm.
mentors. And
Yep.
because there's been so many mentees that I've accumulated over time, I do encourage them to be the ones to take initiative because
Yep.
it's just really hard for me to keep track. I don't have a spreadsheet of dozens of mentees. I don't.
Yeah.
So the folks that follow up, the folks that check in are the folks that nurture that relationship. And so I wanted to remind her that because she said, there's people that said yes to being my mentor, but I haven't touched base with them. And I said, what are you waiting
Yeah.
for?
And then no, I was with graduate students. This was like 5 or 6 years ago at a conference. I just finished up. I was my first year as faculty. I was talking to graduate students, and it was a room of 73 people. I remember that I had to count. And out of the 73 in that room, I gave everybody my contact information. I said, everybody, please let me know I could be of support. One person out of that room reached out. I still keep up with them to this day. I actually talked with her
Mm.
a couple months ago about, and I still bring it up to her like every time, Dr. Henderson, I see you, it's because you're the only person in that room that followed up.
You know what? That's so true. When I give workshops to undergrads, I say, create your LinkedIn account. I'll be your first
Yeah.
connection. Send me a connection request. Here's my link. And it's always one or two
Yeah.
out of 70 people.
Yeah. That's how I go. The win is in the
All
follow
right.
up for sure.
Exactly. All right. So I know you've clearly found a way to leverage all of your skills and bring this all into what you do today.
Yeah.
I want to hear a little bit more about done
Yeah.
dissertation and how you have leveraged all of your skill set into this entrepreneurial role, because I know that there are some folks that are curious about that as another option or as something to supplement their academic career, as another part of their trajectory in their career. So I'm curious for you, how have you leveraged your skill set to build this business?
So the first thing is interesting when people ask me this question is that I take all the skill set I learned in my doctoral program and I apply to business. I see a lot of overlap between business and what you go through to get your dissertation done. And this is how
Yeah.
I would explain it. So imagine when you're writing your dissertation, the first thing you have to identify is what your topic is and what you're going to explore in your study. The same thing in the business. You first have to figure out what is my niche, what is my area of expertise that I want to focus my business in. But just like you would do in your dissertation, the next step is like to explore the literature and see what have people talked about previously to help set up what I want to do in my dissertation because I want to contribute something new. The same thing in business. You literally take us like if you're in a particular area, you look around and say, all right, what are other people doing in this area? What could I do and offer that's unique to the marketplace that consumers or whoever your other buyer is would be interested in and find value in? Once you do that, like the whole process is mirrored. So for me, it made sense as to how to identify my niche, how to, figure out who my target audience was. Like all that started to make sense because I was doing that as a writer anyway, in terms of what I was doing in my
Mhm.
doctoral program. So that's one thing. And I think just generally, there are so many overlapping skills just that you learn through being in a doctoral program, your research and analysis skills. Just that alone in these doctoral programs can be leveraged if you want to be an evaluator on folks' grants. So there are a
Yeah.
lot of folks. I have a team that I work with and we evaluate people's grants. And that just comes from our skill set as just folks who know how to analyze data. Like that's just something very simple. And it's actually can be quite lucrative if that's the route you want to go. You can make 8 to 10% off someone's grants and think about that, how much people are applying for these days. Those are easy, opportunities there. And then also, I think for me, some of the skills from the doctoral program is just how to identify a problem and what doctoral programs sometimes do and don't do. It's kind of mixed bag, but like, what's the solution? Because business is all
Hmm.
about being solution oriented, where sometimes as researchers, sometimes we just kind of play around with the problem a lot. And so if you're someone who can be solution oriented and you really find a problem that is a pain point for people, it's quite easy to make money. If you can make it for as a side business to it could be more than your 9 to 5 job, depending on how you want to go
Hmm.
about it.
Yeah. You know, I hear you talking about all the ways that you have leveraged the skills that specifically the ones from your graduate program,
Yeah.
from writing a dissertation, how they can be applied into a business
Yeah.
and across other industries too. But and I will say this, I know a lot of folks who have trouble with translating
Mm,
those transferable skills,
yes.
and that they have skills, but maybe they haven't been affirmed or validated in their skill set, so they don't feel like they have skills. They're like, "Oh, I can teach, but it's no big deal. Everybody else can teach, or I can analyze data, but everybody else around me analyzes data," because they're so caught up in the subject area expertise that
Yeah.
they lose sight of the skill set. But I'm curious if there's any other ways that you can think of PhD grads in particular, folks who are recent
Mhm.
grads, that they can leverage their skill set, especially if they are feeling that way of, I don't know enough, or everybody else around me has these skills. Who's going to pay me for this?
There are so many other ways. So just to, and it can not even necessarily be research related. If you're someone who has a
Hmm.
lot of practitioner experience, that's another way to leverage that skill set. So my wife and I, we have what's called our business accelerator, where we help folks who have their doctors like to develop their business. So one of our last clients, she was a former superintendent of a small school district, and got her doctorate, and it was trying, had already had a business in place and was looking to grow. But literally, what she did is took her expertise from cultivating what she did in her school district as the superintendent, all those skills and and combined it with her dissertation, explored issues around conflict resolution, conflict transformation, and organization. She takes exactly what she did and actually implements it with other organizations. But this stems from initially her foundation as a practitioner, and she built on it from her research and put it together. So there's practitioner experiences that folks have that I think sometimes we're not looking at quite in the right way. Even just something simple as if you've ever taught a class or been an instructor for a while, you have curriculum design experience, you
Hmm.
are able to teach. So what you could even do stuff where, and this is in the entrepreneurial space, there are a lot of people who create these programs but don't have any background in curriculum design. They're just throwing stuff together. So like you can lend. I have 2 colleagues who do that for other businesses. They literally help them develop and design their curriculum because that's their background. They do it day to day in their job as a professor or as a teacher. So there's so many just simple skills that we already do that you can, turn into an income opportunity. There's actually endless. It's just a matter of which one you want to do and just being willing to put yourself out there and continue to put yourself out there. Because I think the confidence comes from the doing part of
In light of speaking of endless
it.
opportunities, I'm going to get back to you now.
Yeah.
I want to hear about your long-term goals, about your vision for done dissertation,
Yeah.
your vision for your career. I know this is a big question.
Yeah.
Feel free to answer however you like. I know for me, I struggle with the big picture thinking. Not everybody's like this,
Yeah.
but it's exciting to consider, what's to come. So in light of everything that you've accomplished to this day, what do you still hope to do? What are your long-term goals?
Yeah. So on my personal side to the faculty, because I like being I'm still a faculty, I'm tenured faculty. I went through all that process, got tenure, get ready to go for full professor. And so I still like the faculty route. At some point, I might want to be an endowed chair. That's always been my goal in terms of faculty. I just thought that was a great position in terms of how it's structured. It works well for how I like to live as a faculty member. And
Hmm.
so that is definitely on that side, part of the vision there. And then for done dissertation, I just see us, we're expanding rapidly now, but just becoming like the go-to for every university who has a doctoral program so that we can provide the support because we just see it. And we were at this point, we've proven our model. We see it from hundreds of students across all different types of institutions from all different subject areas that the need is there. And so now it's just working with the universities and also working with, our research organizations to provide that infrastructure and support for more students. My initial goal was helping 1,000 doctoral students finish. And I know we'll get to that in like 2 or 3 years here. And then at that point, it's like just how many more can we help support? And then
I
from
love
there, it's
it.
just really the graduates. Now I get to see, like, I have folks who have graduated. I have folks who are or themselves tenured faculty members who have come through our program at this point are now coaches in our program and or out there just like doing great work. So that part for me is even more fulfilling, I think, than some of the other stuff that we will do as a company.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's very exciting. I love to hear that. We need more folks in these roles and the endowed chair roles, especially folks like you. Like
Yeah,
we need more
many of
folks,
us.
Black, brown,
Yeah,
indigenous,
they're
you
not
name
yet
it.
for sure.
And also, institutions desperately need this kind of support. So I know that the work you're doing is really, really important. It's critical and it's changing lives. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're doing this and I appreciate you for being here to share more about that work. As we get close to wrapping up,
Yeah.
is there any other question that you were hoping that I would ask you today?
Good one. I was thinking about that. I'm not sure. You really had some great things. We had some good conversation about just what the future looks like. One thing I will add to kind of the future part as I was thinking is a lot of times for the students, I think you'll be glad to hear this. I know a lot of what we've been doing is a student centered, and that's what we always will remain. But at Dunn Dissertation, we're also adding the faculty component because we know that there is a relationship there, you as a student and your faculty members. And so actually, I
Mhm.
just finished writing the first draft of the book that I'll have coming out sometime, I don't know, early 2025 called The Finish System. And it's a dissertation chair's guide to helping their students from start to defense. And so now I'm going on the faculty side to show them. I've been testing out a model for chairing that I've been working with my own students through. And just
Ooh.
so now I kind of put it together in a book that I can share, easy read. And so now I'm going on that side to really, for us to be able to support both ends, faculty and students. So I did want to add that to the kind of future of what we're going to do at the company. But in terms of questions, no, this was a
Oh,
good
well,
conversation. But go ahead, please.
I was going to say, wait. You just mentioned your book. When is it coming out so that the folks
I
know?
want to see how fast we can get this thing moving. I'm hoping we initially had a February 1st of 2025 as the release. It might happen a little earlier, just depending on how fast I can get through the editing process. Anybody's written stuff, you just know, and books are just, this book's not
Spring.
long, but it's just
Yeah.
a slug to get through. And my first book, I wrote a book, 14 Secrets to a Done Dissertation. That was easier to do. This one, I don't know, it was just a challenge for me to get through that process for some reason this time. But, we're here. The first draft is done. So now I'm just editing and trying to get it out.
Well, congratulations on
Thank you.
getting to this stage. Excited to hear about it coming out in the
Yes,
spring of
indeed.
2025. And okay, final closing words. Any final words of advice you want to share to our listeners, especially those currently in the process of navigating grad school, and also anyone who's interested in entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So for my grad students, if you're in your doc program, please don't try to go through this thing alone, especially if you found that with your approach and way of doing it right now has not been getting you the result that you want. Get help somewhere. Done dissertation. We have plenty of content like on our YouTube channel. It's free. You can get access to it. That might help you think through some of the mindset issues, some of the tactical strategies that you can implement. Some of you might need more help than that, or we definitely have a program to help support, or find someone somewhere. And we have some videos too, just to be mindful. I want to put this out there as a caveat. Be mindful of some of these folks that say they're coaches out here. We continuously get students who come to us and we hear that they gotten like taken advantage of. So just do your due diligence. All I ask is that you do your due diligence on folks that you're going to work with, us included. I always say that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be important for you all. And then for folks who might need some support, we do have a training. It's called Elevate Your Academic Writing. If you're listening, you can get access to this. I'll give you all the number to the text. If you text the word hashtag elevate, ELVATE, to 301-701-2466, you get access to this free training about improving your academic writing. Because I know that's usually a part where graduate students are trying to figure out the writing component. So I try to provide a solution in the training that easily that you can implement in terms of writing strategy. So you can get access to that. And then for folks who are exploring entrepreneurship, first thing first, do it. It's definitely worthwhile. It's something about being and having control over your destiny that I love about entrepreneurship. It's really important to me. So I think it's something that you should explore and just be mindful that not everyone understands this journey that you're on if you go this route. So just be willing to, again, just find a community and find that support that you can amongst, folks who are also entrepreneurs. Because trust me, you find the right entrepreneurs. We all know the struggle of trying to get sales and trying to navigate marketing and how do you keep this business moving? Bring on team, like all the stuff that happens as you're building a business. Definitely find the infrastructure. And if you need support, if you're someone with a doctorate that needs that support, feel free to reach out to us go on www.thedonedissertation.com. If you fill out the contact form, just let us know that you're someone with your doctorate who's looking for help to build your business. And my wife, Renee, who is a co-owner of Done Dissertation, she can help kind of lead you in a direction there in terms of support on the entrepreneurship side. So yeah, it's just so many opportunities. Is y'all just please make sure that you do something. Because I think a lot of things that we can do with our skill sets that not only bring us impact, income, but also help other people get to where they need to be. And I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah. Well, we're going to make sure that folks have access to the links and the information that you shared in the show notes.
Perfect.
But in any case, for folks that resonated, who want to hear more, who want to support your work, who want to connect with you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I'm usually on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, if you find me, Dr. Ramon Goings on LinkedIn. And then Done Dissertation, we're just found on most of the platforms, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Just find Done Dissertation, you'll find us there. And so again, a lot of content online there. And then if folks, want us to come to your university, do workshops and those type of things, so please feel free to reach out. You can reach out through LinkedIn or my website at ramongoings.com, and you can just fill out a contact inquiry and we can get you set up. And yeah, love to help support people. Again, we don't see people win. That's all our whole goal is, like, see people win, whether you work with us or not. That's the goal of this thing for sure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramon, for being here today, for sharing all your insights, your journey, all the advice. I know that there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to resonate with what you shared and who are going to gain a lot from this conversation. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, here are 3 ways you can support the show. The first is to make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The second way is to get your copy of my free resource kit linked in my show notes. This kit includes tools, worksheets, and podcast playlists on all things grad school, productivity, and personal development. The third way to support my show is to follow me on social media. You can find me on Instagram with the handle @Grad School Femtoring and on LinkedIn by searching my name. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.